is live, January 29th, 2016. Today I want to talk a little bit about Tom Welling and the possibility, if it is a possibility, of his appearing as Superman on Supergirl, or his appearing in any capacity in any of the current superhero TV shows between the CW and CBS. So, he did an interview recently with BuzzFeed, and it's a really extensive, really interesting interview where he opens up and talks a lot about how difficult Smallville was to make for him, and the growing pains, and trying to find himself, not sure of who he was while he was making that show, and how he kind of receded into himself, and he gets really personal, and it's really interesting, and I found myself having a bit more respect for him after reading that interview, and how he was, for 10 years, just, on this TV show, working these incredibly long hours, living in Vancouver, not getting to see his family very much, and he says, just like Clark Kent, he had no idea what he was doing, and trying to figure out exactly who he was when he finished this 10-year-long show, and all of a sudden didn't have anything else to do and needed to kind of go off and figure out who he was. And so I thought all that discussion about his identity and stuff was really interesting in that article. But anyway, he's asked, of course, if he would be interested in playing Superman in Supergirl if it was offered to him, and he didn't say no, I never want to do that role again. He said they hadn't talked to him, they hadn't approached him about it, and he didn't really give a real clear answer, but he said it would be weird because he didn't know who that character would be at that point beyond just he's Superman. And it sounds to me like, just reading that article, like he would probably be open to it, and he would consider at least coming in and doing, a cameo thing. I'll talk about what I'd love to see for Tom Welling if he were to ever come back and do Superman again, and what I'd love to see for crossovers in general with these things, and specifically Supergirl. But I want to start with just that comment about, I don't know who he is anymore, and I doubt very much that Tom Welling is probably watching Supergirl. But the important thing to keep in mind, of course, is that Supergirl is, and I mean, I'm not dogging him real hard for saying that. I don't want to be a fanboy about it, but I just think it would be important for Tom Welling, and I'm sure somebody would brief him on this if they were indeed, and this screams unlikely to me, but if Berlanti or somebody were to come to him and say, we're finally going to cast Superman, he's actually going to appear in Supergirl, we'd like you to play him, surely someone would brief Tom Welling that he would not be playing the Smallville version of Clark Kent in Superman. There's no way. It's obviously a very different universe. There are a whole lot of characters that are different from their Smallville counterparts, the least of which being Supergirl herself. Backstory is totally different, the characterization totally different. We've got a different Toyman, we have a different Jimmy Olsen, we have, I guess, even going down to simply, there's only one Jimmy Olsen here, and there's kind of two in Smallville. There's a different Lucy Lane, so anyway, the list goes on. He would not be playing the same character, so when he says, I don't know who that character would be anymore, besides Superman, no, it would have to be, and this is what would be weird about it, it would have to be Tom Welling playing a totally different Superman. Here's what I think would make a lot more sense. First of all, there has been talk about just fan speculation, this idea that wouldn't it be fun to get to see the future of the Smallville universe as one of the alternate dimensions in the Flash Arrow universe, in the one of the 52 Earths. And yes, absolutely. And I've been saying how much fun it would be to get to see that too. And I would much rather see Tom Welling play Superman there. And of course, it'd be impossible to do both, I think, if the crossover that's been talked a lot about with bringing Supergirl and the Flash Arrow universe together were to happen, then you'd be playing two entirely different Supermans, and that would just be really strange. So, and as I said, I really doubt seriously that he would be who they would go to if Superman were to be cast in that show. And of course, it's hard to guess whether or not that could ever even happen. But, and I'll talk about that in a second, but as I said, I would love to see, him come back and reprise Clark Kent and be as the Smallville version, and just do one episode. And because the thing is, whoever they get is probably going to have to be available to come back, and not just like come in for one quick cameo as Superman. That'd be really weird, since we've already had Superman show up in various ways off screen, where he's in text messages, or we see like a blur of him. You see just, his cape and his legs, and that's about it. I think that structurally and like thematically, just storytelling wise, you don't want to bring Superman full-fledged into the show until he becomes a supporting character in a story arc that is still all about Supergirl, all about our main protagonist, but now Superman has to be a player in that story. And I actually think his being in the background and sort of showing up but not actually getting to see him would be a lot less silly and a lot less of a, kind of a gimmicky, well, we want to have Superman but we can't have Superman kind of move, if we actually finally cast him and put him in a story that you just need Superman to tell. So the whole, Supergirl, this is my story. And by the way, I'm glad that they've stopped having that voiceover and having her say that, but that whole, this is my story thing would play a lot better, I think, if you eventually had that. So those earlier episodes, I think, would actually kind of watch a little bit better if it was like, yeah, we want Superman in the background because it's a POV thing, it's a perspective thing. We want Superman to feel like this larger-than-life character, and this is a universe that revolves around him, but we're following this smaller character who's becoming a bigger character and making it all about who she is and what she's about, and getting it away from this kind of like godlike iconic presence. Once you've really established her and let her carve out her corner of that universe, as she's doing, and as I think is working fairly well, then eventually it would make a lot of sense to bring in Superman, and now she stands up next to him and he's not overshadowing her anymore. Maybe wait until you get more of this feeling of the world that she's also kind of this towering godlike figure that a lot of people really look up to and respect, and have a hard time seeing as anything but this really perfect being. Then you bring Superman in. How much fun would it be to get to see a Supergirl, Superman, Martian Manhunter team up in Supergirl? So I am all for eventually bringing Superman into the show. Again, it's a thing that I don't know if it would ever happen, but I tell you who I'd like to see play it. I think, realistically, and I'm not saying that it would be awful if they got Tom Welling, and before I reveal that, let me say this. If Tom Welling were to do it, and they did go ahead and have a Superman, and it was Tom Welling, and he had the availability, because the thing is, he's working on a pilot for a TV show right now, and if that goes to pilot and then goes to series, he just wouldn't be available, probably, to be in the show regularly, anything like regularly, or even on a, occasional guest star basis. But anyway, so even if it were to happen, it seems to me like what would be the kind of the selling point for that would be making it a tribute to Smallville in the first place, as being the big show that got all this started. We've got this huge superhero TV boom. Arguably, you would never have that without Smallville, and so we really have it to thank, regardless of what we might think of that show, or my love-hate relationship with the actual material of that show. It was very popular, especially for CW numbers, and it was successful, and there were some growing pains in figuring out how to make a show like that finally got us to a place where we can do something that is and again, arguably, you could have done this all along, but you've got network executives now behind. Yes, it's okay to have costumes. No, we don't have to be too realistic or grounded anymore. We can just straight up adapt comic books and make them into serialized TV shows. And also, of course, importantly, the technology is caught up now to where it's much easier to do that kind of stuff and it not cost a relative fortune, and for it to look decent enough to do a serialized, and that's wonderful because comic books have always been serialized storytelling. So it's really great that it doesn't have to just be a one and done movie anymore. You can tell these stories and week to week, or in the long form Netflix format, or however you're going to do it. And so it's cool that we had Smallville to kind of get us there in the first place, and that made Green Arrow popular. And if you wouldn't have had that, there would have never been consideration of doing an Arrow series. And of course, that's what spearheaded all of this. So it would make sense to do it as a tribute to that. Kind of tipping their hat to where all this started, and Supergirl would be the most appropriate place to do that. However, I still say that it would be an even better tribute and a bigger treat to just revisit the Smallville universe and see Tom Welling as Superman there, because you'd still get him in costume. You could still have Tom Welling. Thinking about what the Tom Welling Superman looked like in that final episode of Smallville, and of course we never really got to see Tom Welling play Superman because he wouldn't put the costume on, and so he'd have to work out and get fit and get I mean, he looks fit to me, but fit enough, I guess, in his mind to play the, because that was his big excuse, was I won't put on or reason, I don't know, that I won't put on the costume because it takes months of training to look good enough for that kind of form-fitting thing. So he'd have to do that. But then I was thinking about what it looked like, and I was like, well, you'd want, I would kind of love to see like Superman's Smallville's own take on the Superman costume instead of using the Brandon Routh Superman Returns version. And then I thought, wait a minute, the person to play Superman and Supergirl is Brandon Routh. And yes, I realize that he's currently playing a superhero in the Arrow Flash universe, and that if we do finally get that crossover, which is looking more and more likely, by the way, that if we finally get the Supergirl crossover with the Arrow and Flash universe, that now you'd have Brandon Routh playing two different characters. That is different, though, than having Tom Welling playing two different Supermans, right? It seems like a more likely possibility. There's all kinds of precedent for actors playing two different characters in the same universe, especially if there's no cost for them ever to be on screen together. And then sometimes it's fun to find a reason to put them on screen together because we have the technology to do that. And we see this. We saw this on Star Trek all the time, and obviously all kinds of other shows. But the first thing that springs to mind, of course, is Jeffrey Combs, who played a number of different roles in Star Trek. It doesn't stop you from casting that person if it's the right person for it necessarily. And I think it'd be really cool to see Brandon Routh do it because. Yes, he played a particular version already, but it's kind of different than bringing in Tom Welling and trying to get him to play a more traditional Superman that doesn't have the kind of like angsty teenage baggage behind him, that doesn't have that kind of like conflicted drama that was in his background, because the picture I get in my head of the Superman in Supergirl is the very traditional kind of Christopher Reeve version. And wouldn't it make perfect sense to have Brandon Routh come in and just do exactly what he did in Superman Returns, in the performance, not necessarily obviously in the way it was written, but just have Brandon Routh come in and do basically that performance again, because it's the closest thing to Christopher Reeve that we have right now that could put on the suit and do it. He's also slightly older. This is a universe where Superman's been around for quite a while, for quite a long time, it seems, and so having a slightly older Superman would make sense. Tom Welling, I think, is also, pushing 40 or is 40, and so he would be a slightly older Superman than we're used to also, but I don't know, I think it should be Brandon Routh if we were to do it at all, and I think that, I just think that his sensibilities, that's the version of Superman that we already have in that show. He would be a perfect fit. He'd be exactly the right person for it, I think. And it also would be a really nice thing to do for Brandon Routh, because what happened with Superman Returns was really unfortunate, and the fact that movie didn't get a sequel, and the fact that it didn't perform as well as they might have hoped, and that a lot of people don't like it, was not his fault. And I think that he was a good fit for that role, a good pick, and he's had he hasn't had this big giant success that people might have expected he would get after playing Superman. I realize that George Reeves was kind of typecast, but we live in a day and age now where you don't seem to get typecast as much getting superhero roles. You tend to, especially if you're a really good actor, you tend to just get more work these days. You look at a lot of people that were kind of nobodies that then were superheroes and are now considered kind of A-list actors, like Chris Hemsworth, and you're like, oh, it sucks. We weren't there yet in 2006, and so anyway, I think it would be a wonderful thing for Brandon Routh. He should get to play the part again, and in something that frankly, in my opinion, just kind of gets that character better and has a better sense of maybe what to do with it. Because I like their Superman, or at least the picture in my head of what their Superman is, what they've given us about him so far. So anyway, for me, it ought to be Brandon Routh. Now, as far as the crossover, the potential crossover with the Arrow Flash universe is concerned, keep in mind, of course, that the Supergirl universe is a very different universe that already had Superman there. We've never had any mention of him, or for that matter, aliens, really, in Flash and Arrow. I mean, I guess there's like some background stuff, but cause see, I'm not even sure if we really straight up said that like Hawkman and Hawkgirl that comes from another planet at all. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, because I know there's all the Egyptian stuff and everything, but like, I don't know if we've gotten a sense yet that like the powers and reincarnation and all that comes from otherworldly stuff. But anyway, so we haven't even really broached, and it's so weird. We've got magic, and we haven't even really broached intergalactic stuff yet in that universe. And so obviously they can't be straight up in the same universe. And a lot of people have said, well, how in the world could you cross them over? Well, some people have just straight up said, well, no, it'd be easy, just cross them over. And I'm like, no, they're different continuities. Clearly, it wouldn't work. But then other people have said, well, obviously, what you would do is just, and this is obvious to me too, that you would just take the Supergirl universe and again make it one of the 52 universes, one of the 52 dimensions in Flash and Arrow. And I think it would be really cool if one of them was Supergirl and one of them was Smallville. And you could do this really with anything now if you wanted to. I don't know that you'd want to do this. You could do it with Gotham. That's the only way that you could possibly cross those over, and it would make any sense because Gotham seems very outside of time and has even used one or two of the same characters, different versions from things in Arrow and Flash. So anyway, so to recap real quick, Tom Welling, I would love to see come back and play his version of Superman in alternate reality in Arrow and Flash that happens to be Smallville. I think it would be such a coup to rope Smallville into the continuity as an alternate DC universe. I think that'd be really cool. Secondly, Brandon Routh really ought to play Superman in Supergirl if we're to do it. Something else that I meant to bring up is that apparently, because I was really suspicious that we would ever see Superman in this TV show, because DC tends to, Warner's tends to not like to have a screen version of a character, of a big character like that, Superman or Batman, and then do them also in television. So it was okay with having a Clark Kent and a Superman and Superman Returns, because that was already going and it was a very different thing, and it wasn't an origin thing like Batman Begins, which is why the young Bruce Wayne show didn't happen. That turned into Smallville. But anyway, so I'm still kind of suspicious, but less so than I was, because I didn't think that we would see him at all, and they are casting a young Kal-El. And we're doing flashbacks with that here pretty soon, apparently, this season. And that's a thing that I didn't think I would see. But again, that's still not Superman in costume. And given, Superman versus Batman and doing the whole cinematic universe thing, it's it's hard to imagine that they would go ahead and do it, but I'm hoping that they do. It's a thing that I think should happen with all the Kryptonian stuff going on. I think it's really weird if that doesn't happen. Now, I do think that Tom Welling could come in and guest star and play somebody else in Supergirl, even if he also got to play his Clark Kent again at some point. It'd be cool to have him be a Kryptonian or something. Maybe even a bad guy. It might be neat. But anyway, so what do you folks think about this? Would you like to see Tom Welling reprise Superman? And do you think that he is that he would be the guy to play Superman in Supergirl if that happened? Or do you agree with me in that it ought to be Christopher Routh, or Christopher Routh? Wow. Or do you agree with me that it ought to be Brandon Routh? Or is there even somebody else that you might have in mind that would be really cool for that? I think it ought to be somebody that either has played Superman before or is very connected to that, Superman history in some form, screen history in some form or another. But anyway, I'd love to see your comments, and thanks a lot for watching. I'm Captain Logan, and this concludes today's Captain's Log.